On July 24, 2003, Tanya Mitcham, a mother of four, was driving on I-75 in South Georgia in a severe rainstorm and was fatally struck by a Terminix company utility truck which slid out of control, crossed the median, killing Tanya and gravely injuring one of her surviving children, Mallory. Jim Butler and Matt Cook, partners in the law firm of Butler, Wooten, Freihofer, later proved that the Terminix truck had extremely worn-out tires, one with 87,000 miles on it, and was sent out in this inclement weather despite two employee requests for new tires. They also proved how Terminix concealed and covered up key statements of management employees covering up these facts, and how the Georgia's Department of Transportation was liable because of a blocked highway drain which caused the rainwater to flood the roadway. The Insider Exclusive presents the true story of justice for Tanya Mitcham and her family, and how this law firm of Butler, Wooten, Freihofer for more than 40 years has earned a reputation as one of the best plaintiff trial lawyers in the country. They've won over 150 civil cases, and the top 10 victories have resulted in verdicts totaling more than $1 billion. You'll see how Butler, Wooten, Freihofer's desire for justice, attention to detail, and a sense of urgency and their need to help those who have suffered all drive the firm to seek justice for all. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive live from Atlanta, Georgia at the Butler, Wooten, Freihofer firm. I am very pleased today to introduce two outstanding lawyers. Jim Butler, welcome to the show.
Yes, sir.
Matt Cook, welcome to the show. They're going to be talking about a case that never went to trial. It was settled confidentially. It was Mitcham versus Terminix in the Georgia Department of Transportation. It's a very interesting case, so let's talk about this case. What exactly happened?
Well, this case arose from a head-on collision on July 24th, 2003, when a Terminix truck was driving in some fairly heavy rain on I-75, an interstate in South Georgia. And the Terminix truck encountered some ponding water on the interstate, lost control, crossed the median, struck the Mitcham minivan head-on. Tanya Mitcham and three of her children were headed that morning to a theme park in South Georgia. And unfortunately, they were struck by the Terminix truck.
Now, there were three, if I remember correctly, there were three defendants in this case. Obviously, the driver of the truck, Terminix, it's one of these, the bug truck, right? The utility truck, pickup truck, correct? And the Georgia State Department of Transportation. Why was the Department of Transportation a defendant in the case?
Well, when we were first hired, we immediately went out and looked at the truck. And the most striking feature of the truck was the rear tires. And the rear tires were very slick, very worn.
Yeah.
And the second thing that we knew about the case initially was that it had happened in the rain. And so we went to the scene of the wreck. And in looking around there, we found a curb drain on the side of the highway that was clogged. It was filled with dirt and grass. And the Georgia Department of Transportation, like all state departments, have an obligation to keep the highway well maintained and their drains free of debris.
When I read this, I thought, wow, this is amazing that you were able to, because there's so many highways in Georgia, right? That means they're responsible for going out and making sure all of these drains are free of any kind of debris or anything?
Well, it's particularly important on interstate highways because people drive at such speeds.
Yeah.
And yes, the Department of Transportation is obligated to maintain the drains. This drain had not been maintained in so long that there was tall grass growing out of the dirt and sand that was clogging the drain. I can't remember, man. Wasn't it 3-month-old grass? Our expert said the grass had been there like 3 months without anybody checking it. And what's extraordinary about that is in South Georgia, where it's relatively flat, it's likely that the water had been ponding on that roadway for a long time.
And ponding for us people from California means it wasn't allowed to be drained. It
Right.
was,
What happens is
it was like a lake.
If you get standing water on asphalt,
Yeah.
or concrete or a roadway, then when a car hits it going 60, 70 miles an hour, it hydroplanes.
Yes.
Goes out of control. Particularly if the vehicle has basically bald rear tires, which
Yes.
this Terminix truck did.
Unfortunately, Tanya Mitcham, the driver, didn't survive the crash, and I think she had her 4 children in the
3 children in the car.
3 children in the vehicle, one of whom was severely injured for life. Tell us a little bit about Tanya Mitcham. You know, we talk about someone was killed. Who was she? You know.
Tanya was an exceptional person by all accounts. She was a mother of 4. She was a registered nurse. She married her college sweetheart, Vernon Mitcham. They had been married nearly 20 years when this happened. On the day of the wreck, she had her 3 oldest children in the minivan headed to a theme park. And Vernon got the phone call that nobody wants to get, that his wife and children were in a very bad accident, and they didn't know if Tanya would live. So Vernon set out to the wreck scene and found out that one of his daughters had been sent to a hospital in Macon, Georgia, and his wife had been sent to the hospital in Valdosta and was on life support. Tanya was very active in her church. She was an includer, never an excluder. If there was a new person to a group or a new person in the room, Tanya was the first to stick out her hand and make sure they felt welcome. Mm-hmm. She was the mom and wife that everybody wants or wants to be.
The defendants, Terminix, the driver, and the Department of Transportation, the Georgia State Department of Transportation. What was your strategy initially to win this case? What did you have to prove? This didn't go to trial, but if you were going to go to trial, and you take all your cases seriously as if you're going to go to trial, what were you out to prove why these 3 defendants were liable?
Well, with respect to Terminix, one of the big questions was, what in the world is a national company like this doing, letting a truck get on the road with obviously unsafe tires? I mean, all you had to do was look at the rear tires and know they were unsafe.
Yeah.
And so one of the big things that we wanted to do was to discover the internal documents and talk to employees of Terminix to find out if the reason this unsafe truck was allowed on the roadway was just simple negligence.
Yes.
Somebody wasn't paying attention, or was it deliberate?
Yeah.
And what we found out, incredibly, after going through a prolonged battle to get their internal documents and to talk to some of their employees, was that the driver and others had complained about these tires for a good period of time before the wreck happened. And Terminix management was in a cost-cutting mode, and the supervisor had just refused to let them put new tires on the truck. As a result, Tanya Mitcham is dead. Terminix saved a little money, but Tanya Mitcham was killed.
And I think later in this case, you also proved that one of the incentives for cutting costs was that at the end of the year, the managers would receive a bigger bonus, wouldn't
Right.
they? So it was all like self-serving, wasn't it? Someone's life is gone and that sort of thing. Tell us a little bit about the defense's strategy. What was, and we see this time and time again, where they try to point the finger to somebody else. They withhold evidence. They make it difficult for you to get, you mentioned the internal documents and that sort of thing. What was their strategy? What did they do? What did they do? What were the difficulties, the roadblocks that you encountered?
Well, in this case, we knew that a lot of the proof would come from the defendant's own files.
Yeah.
And we knew we were in a fight for that from the outset. And so we set about to interview as many people that were on the inside that we could find.
Let me interrupt you with this is a serious question. You've known defendants before that have destroyed documents, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay. Assuming that everybody's going to destroy documents, how do you prevent that? Or can you? Can you go into court and you can get an order from the judge that the destruction of any documents is going to be cost, X amount of dollars or whatever? Can you do anything like that? Or do you have to find out after the fact?
This case is a good example to use in answering that question. The only impediment to a corporate defendant's destruction of evidence is the fear that the corporate defendant may have of being found out. It relates there are two ways that the corporate defendant can be found out. One is it doesn't successfully destroy all copies of the document. Mm-hmm. And the other is that it doesn't control all the people who know of the existence of a document. So that's the problem corporate defendants have, those corporate defendants that are willing to destroy evidence. Mm-hmm. They've got to worry about whether they've gotten all the copies, yes, which is oftentimes impossible to know. And they've got to worry about whether somebody, an employee or former employee, will tell us that, oh, you missed a document. This existed. And that's what happened in this case about some written statements. The defendant denied they existed, and we found out that they did exist.
Let's talk about, the tire test. Let's talk about the 87,000 miles on one tire. How did you, it would seem to me that a corporate defendant might have switched tires, maybe put new tires on, because you went out after the fact. You didn't go out the day of the accident. You didn't examine the truck the day of the accident, right? Where was that truck impounded? It was back at Terminix, wasn't it?
Well, the State Patrol arrived on the scene, and the truck was then towed away at the order of the State Patrol, and it was impounded. And true, we didn't get to it on the day of the incident.
So Terminix couldn't get to it?
We believe that's true.
They couldn't change the tires.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing about the tires was they had maintenance records that would document when the tires were put on. And when we saw those, we learned that one of the tires had more than 80,000 miles on it, and the other had more than 65,000 miles on it. Yeah. And tire wear is not something that happens overnight.
This case did not go to trial. Correct. It was settled.
Correct.
How do you know when to settle the case? I mean, you've been a lawyer for a long time. You've been involved with a lot of cases. Does it all come down to the amount of money that the other side's willing to offer? Is that what it comes down to?
Yes.
And what you expect, what you would have expected out of a case like this. You have someone who died, mother of 4. You have one of the daughters, permanent disabilities. How do you put a value on that?
Generally, it comes down to the money. And what we do, it depends on the injuries and the caliber of the people involved. I mean, Tanya Mitcham was, she was just an extraordinary human being. And in Georgia, the value of a life, the standard for deciding the value of the life is the jury has to get to know the decedent.
Yes. And
put a value on the decedent's life as if the decedent were still alive. I mean, what was that person's life worth to themselves?
It seems so difficult.
It is difficult to do, but it's a novel philosophical concept. I mean, Georgia was the first state back in the 19th century to adopt that approach. But it's a concept that really puts a high value on human life.
Right.
So, we keep track of jury verdicts everywhere, and it depends on what venue you're in and what kind of verdicts have occurred down there. And in a case like this, we've proved that Terminix was reckless and their conduct was willful and wanton, so that punitive damages are involved. That changes the value of the case, increases the value of the case.
Yeah.
And what happened in this case, frankly, is that Terminix and its insurer threw so much money at the case that...
You mean the lawyer fees?
No.
The settlement.
The settlement was so the settlement they ultimately offered was so large that we had to advise the client that we didn't think there was a very large chance of getting more than that at trial. What we do in cases is, generally speaking, after a lot of study and deliberation, we'll come up with a range of verdicts which we think are likely. Yeah. And our prognostications have been highly correct.
Yeah. And in fact, the other side, because you've had some of the top verdicts in the country, over $1 billion, I think, as a discount, right? The other side sees the kind of verdicts you can get, and they take that into consideration too, right?
I'm sure they do.
How
You
do
know, our view about trying a case is that's
Yeah.
that's the best part of what we do. We don't get to go to trial very often anymore, but we love to go to trial. Every case we take, we won't take it unless we're willing to try it, and
Yeah.
we prepare every case for trial. And if the defendants don't want to settle, that's fine with us.
Yeah. When you're helping the jury see the value of a person's life, how do you do that? You know, a lot of lawyers are going to be watching this, and you are one of the best trial attorneys in the country. How do you, you know, we're talking about value. You don't say she was a good mother, therefore that's worth $5 million.
Well,
okay?
there are components, there are two different components to the full value of a life. One is the economic, which is basically add up the paychecks,
Yeah.
which doesn't do justice to anybody, certainly to someone who's not a highly paid physician, lawyer, or executive. But the other part of the value of a human life is the intangible value. What we do is we present witnesses
Yeah.
who teach the jury who this person was and what the person was like.
So, for example, she was active in the PTA. She was a registered nurse. She took in, as you mentioned, Max, she was an includer, not an excluder. She active in her church, volunteered a lot. So people are getting the picture that she's of great value. Everybody liked
To her family, to
Yeah.
her church, to her community,
How do they put a dollar
to the
amount
medical
on that?
profession. We make suggestions about what we think the value of the life is, but it's ultimately up to the jury. To get back to the question you asked a moment ago, one of the really important things that you have to do in trying a case like this, or any case
Yeah.
for damages, is to be careful not to exaggerate, not to embellish,
Yeah.
not to, to use the word I use, not to puff the
Yeah.
case. I mean, we try to present cases like this and the damages evidence by just setting out the facts. And we don't seek emotion, we don't seek sympathy.
Yeah.
We just do what the law compels us to do and tells us to do, and that is teach the jury about
Yeah.
this person.
I'm just curious because there were three defendants, the driver, Terminix, and the Department of Transportation. What percentage of liability to each one of them did each one of them have?
That was a concept that we struggled with the whole case. And we couldn't find a way to fairly apportion the damages, 10% to the state or 90% to the driver. For this reason, because the driver had driven several miles that morning at the same speed on the same tires without getting in a wreck. He only got in a wreck when he encountered the ponding water.
Yeah.
At the same time, several other cars had driven through the same puddle of water and not lost control.
Yeah.
And in our mind, it was inseparable. Without the combination of these three actors' neglect, there'd have been no wreck.
Right. They're all interconnected, but when it comes right down to the final line, whatever that number is, Georgia Department of Transportation has to pay X amount of dollars because they have a percentage of that. Is that the way to determine that? Or is it one big pot, someone's going to say, you put in more than me?
This case was unique because when you sue the state,
Yeah.
they have a maximum exposure that's imposed by the law. So they cannot pay more than $1 million in any case.
I got it.
And so that affects the dynamic.
One of the things that was very instrumental, smoking gun, if you will, in this case, was the statement given to your law firm by the Terminix service manager, wasn't it? It was a key element in this case, wasn't it? Today, fortunately, we have somebody who is going to tell us a little bit about that statement, so let's go to him right now. A very important deciding factor in this case was when a Terminix service manager came forward and gave a very revealing statement. His name was Bill McLaughlin. He can't be with us today, but an actor is here. Mace Archer, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
You're intimately aware of what Bill said in his statement. Tell us a little bit about what went on that day of the accident and what led up to there.
Well, Bill joined Terminix out of the Air Force and was a great boost for the company because he had a background in maintenance issues and that sort of thing. He was a pest tech initially, but then he was promoted to service manager. And the day of the accident, Bill had noted that the rear tires of that particular vehicle were balding. And he had said those tires need to be changed specifically. And he was surprised when the accident occurred to find that the tires, in fact, had not been changed as per his request.
And what happened after that? Because, you know, the law firm, Butler Wooten, sued them. And was there a kind of a cover-up there? What exactly happened?
Well, yeah. Bill actually was one of the first called to the scene to sort of investigate the scene for the company. Mm-hmm. And as I said, he saw at that point that the tires had not been changed and felt that that was part of what had caused the accident. He was asked by branch manager to provide a statement about the accident. And Bill had said that he had told the service tech himself and the branch manager that the tires needed to be changed, the rear tires needed to be changed.
Yes.
When the branch manager saw the statement that Bill had prepared, the branch manager requested that he adjust the statement.
Change it.
Yes, the statement initially read that the rear tires needed to be changed. The branch manager requested that Bill add the word soon to that statement.
Did Bill eventually change his statement?
Actually, he did change the statement. In fact, the branch manager told Bill that it was his job as a Terminix manager to keep the best interests of Terminix in mind, and that the original statement, as he had written it, was, quote, enough to burn Terminix.
We've just heard Bill's story, but Bill wasn't at Terminix when you found him, was he?
That's right.
How did you find him?
Well, in the case, the driver had testified that there had been a conversation about the tires. And during that testimony, we knew there was a significant development in the case. That not only were the tires in bad condition, but Terminix knew about their condition prior to the wreck and didn't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to find support for the driver's testimony. And we began to look for former employees. Terminix initially refused to tell us who was a former employee.
So how did you track him down?
Well, we filed a motion with the court, and Terminix capitulated. And then, through our investigator, we found Mr. McLaughlin, and I spoke with him on a Sunday night, and he told me that he had prepared a statement, that he had ordered that the tires be replaced, and they'd never been replaced. And not only had that happened, we had asked for statements in the case, and Terminix had said they didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So not only had they knew about the tires and failed to do anything about it, but they had concealed evidence in the case.
Interesting. I'm glad you found that out. You know, your law firm, Jim, Matt, makes a huge contribution, which a lot of people are not aware of, to public safety. Tell us how, through your litigation, and a lot of great trial lawyers, how you contribute to making this world safer for people who operate vehicles, who operate boats and planes and any kind of consumer product. How do you do that?
Well, the threat of liability. There are really only two methods by which people and corporations are held responsible for conduct that endangers others. One is by government regulation, the other is by lawsuits. The first, government regulation, is of dubious effectiveness at best. Too often the government regulators are captured by the entities they're supposed to regulate.
Yes.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which administers the federal motor vehicle safety standards, is the classic example of that problem. It's had a revolving door for most of the last 30 years, where high executives within the government regulating entity have left and gone to work for the automakers. And so the effectiveness of government regulation is suspect. The really effective break on conduct that endangers others is from lawsuits. And the plaintiff's lawyers, most of whom are highly motivated and care a lot about their clients and about the safety of the American people, do a really good job of investigating these things and digging up the truth. And that has a deterrent effect on bad conduct. But along about 1999, 98 or 99, I was to introduce Ralph Nader at some event and decided to do a study of motor vehicle deaths in the United States, and to try to gauge Nader's contribution. Nader and Senator Abraham Ribicoff from Connecticut basically started the federal motor vehicle safety standards. And at about the same time, some courts, principally in California, were transforming product liability laws. And modern automotive safety stems from those two sources originally. And as I recall, I extrapolated the per capita death rate in this country from 1964 to 1999. In 1964, there were a whole lot fewer people in this country than there are today. I forget the exact population then, but I looked it up. And if the same death rate had continued from 1964 to 1999, as I recall, we would have been losing about 140,000 people a year killed on American highways in 1999.
Right.
In fact, we only lost about 41,000. The difference is almost 100,000 lives saved every year. And that results basically from two things. One is what Nader and Ribicoff did, and the judges who remade products liability law in the late 60s and early 70s. And then what the plaintiffs' lawyers did with that. As a direct result of those things, automakers started making far safer vehicles.
You have a website. Would you mind giving that website out so folks can find out more
Butler
information?
Wooten, ButlerWooten.com.
Yeah, and I just want to tell our audience, not only with this case, but in a number of cases, you have probably the biggest verdicts of any law firm in the country, don't you, in terms of monetary settlements?
I don't know that we've compared it with all the other law firms in the country. I doubt if there's anybody that has more large verdicts and settlements than us.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again on this case. It's a sad, it's a sad situation. You did the family right. You got right to the details, and you represented real people in a great way. Thanks for watching. To get more information about our guest and the cases, please visit www.insiderexclusive.tv. Thank you.